AuctionsPlus, the national online sale yard system, turned 30 this year. While it hasn't replaced physical sale yards, it is disrupting the traditional industry by offering buyers and livestock producers an alternative way of doing business. CEO Anna Speer says while she's pleased turnover is increasing, she's frustrated with poor internet services in the bush. Anna Speer was in Brisbane recently for the Ekka, and I caught up with her ringside. Anna Speer, welcome to Landline.
Thanks, Pip. It's so exciting to be here.
AuctionsPlus turned 30 this year. What was it at the start?
So AuctionsPlus was established in 1986, which quite extraordinarily was before the internet. It was previously known as CALM, Computer-Aided Livestock Marketing, and it was put together by a grant from AMLC, the old Meat Industry Corporation. It was essentially designed to trade livestock electronically because online didn't exist at that point in time, but it was designed to help facilitate the exchange of livestock in a more transparent way.
Given the slow dial-up speeds back then, it seems incredible it even got off the ground.
Pip, it is so amazing that it even got started. These guys were absolute visionaries. They were looking far further into the future than I think I've ever looked. They were essentially looking for technology that didn't exist in the time. So the first sale I think that they had in Tasmania was an electronic sale where they had to roll out 2 kilometres of telephone cable to be able to sell the animals electronically. They had a little generator to power the guy who had his connection back to Sydney through a fax modem. And there was quite a funny story about this guy, Dick Bruce, who was the guy receiving the bids in from Sydney, and as the sale progressed he had to talk via a two-way radio to the auctioneer, who was getting a little bit terse about having to wait for Sputnik as the sale proceeded. So it was quite extraordinary and very, very brave in an industry that is somewhat traditional at the best of times.
So what does AuctionsPlus do now?
We're essentially eBay for cows and sheep. We're an online sale yard that's really focused on facilitating the exchange of livestock nationally.
Well, what's the benefit to a producer of using AuctionsPlus and not going to a sale yard?
So the benefit for a producer when selling on AuctionsPlus as opposed to selling in a sale yard situation is the access to a national market, access to the online platform, which ensures that their stock remain at home until they're sold. So from an animal welfare perspective, those animals are in their care until they're sold. It's also the opportunity to reduce the costs for the producer. They don't have to pay freight to the yards, they don't have to cop expensive yard fees, and they're not using kilograms of beef or lamb in the process. It's also great for the buyer because they get access to a product that is essentially coming direct out of the paddock. The producer also gets to avoid the volatility of the market because they can either re-offer their stock if they don't meet their reserve. Alternatively, they can look to forward contract those animals, which allows them to forward plan for their market as well as allowing the buyers to secure up supply.
What sort of volumes is AuctionsPlus doing with sheep and cattle sales?
The sort of volumes that AuctionsPlus is trading at the moment, the last financial year we did about 2.2 million sheep and about 340,000 head of cattle, which has actually moved us to the #1 largest sale yard in Australia. The volumes are growing. In the last 5 years we've seen about 58% growth in cattle numbers and about 9% growth in the sheep numbers, and we're forecasting that growth to continue because I do truly believe that the future for selling livestock is online, and we're getting very close to that tipping point where we'll start to see more and more people online.
Is AuctionsPlus a digital disruptor just like Airbnb or Uber?
I absolutely regard ourselves as a digital disruptor like Airbnb and Uber. We're very similar and we have similar value sets. We're all disrupting traditional markets. We're not as big as Airbnb and Uber, but we're all really focused on accountability and trust. So how can you create the relationships that we have in the physical environment, particularly in the Australian livestock sector, and bring them online? Because that's how we will eventually have an ecosystem that really supports the Australian livestock supply chain.
The data drought is a huge issue in the bush. How does that impact on your ability to run the business?
The data drought is our biggest challenge, to be honest. It is a serious problem for Australia, and unfortunately we're now designing our software to deal with crappy internet connections, which is a real shame. What do we do about that? I think we should all be writing to our local politicians, but in all honesty, it's time for Australia to get serious. We have such an innovative culture. We've got farmers that are desperate to have access to technology, yet we're silly enough to tell them to, embrace technology when they don't have access to mobile phones, mobile phone reception in their areas. It is something that is so critical for the Australian industry. When we're running sales at AuctionsPlus, we actually monitor all of the buyers that are logged in, because a lot of farmers have problems with their dial-up connections or satellite connections, and when they drop out, we actually have to pick up the phone and call them to make sure that they don't miss out on the opportunity of a sale. That's great that we do that, and a wonderful service, but realistically, that's not nimble, that's not agile. We need to be finding solutions that help these people be connected.
You've had some key milestones recently, starting with the Wagyu Revolution. What's that?
More recently, we saw a clear demonstration of the power of the auction system in disrupting traditional markets. And what I mean by that is markets that have traditionally just sold direct without an auction competition, where the farmer has had a direct relationship with the buyer. The best example of that are Wagyu cattle, and they've traditionally been sold direct because when you put them in a sale yard, they don't look that nice next to an Angus animal, and those niche buyers don't tend to turn up to sale yards. So accidentally, via a social media tweet, more technology, we picked up a line of F1 Wagyu steers, and the market went bananas. The price increase was something like 480 cents a kilo live up to 554 cents, and it's now sitting at an average of 660 cents a kilo live now, today. So we've really seen the effects of disrupting a traditional market.
Just celebrated 30 years. What do you think the next decade holds for the business?
The next decade, wow. For me, the first couple of years for us is about building online accountability and trust. I think the industry also has a real challenge with volatility, and so we're going to look at ways to take that volatility out of the market, whether that's through forward contracts, procurement strategies, things that create a better ecosystem where everyone is getting what they deserve. We've got to take the seesaw momentum out, where people are getting top prices one week and bottom prices the next week. At the moment, I believe the processors and the feedlotters really are bleeding. We do need to make this stabilise a little bit if we want the industry to work together collaboratively, and I think there's a real opportunity there, and hopefully I have the opportunity to play a part in that, along with a lot of our other customers and partners.
Anna Speer, thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Pip. It's been an absolute pleasure.